our MUNOG video. We are students from André Gymnasium Herrenberg in Germany, and today we will present to you the role and responsibility of media, as well as the accessibility of media.
The definition of media. The media is a means of communication which provides and distributes information in written, pictorial or tonal form among an undetermined number of people and thus among a widely spread audience which remains anonymous. The media is an institutionalized entity which is both problem-solving and the cause of new problems. They are an intricate system revolving around fabrication, reception and distribution of information. They exist in digital form as well as traditional form. Types of media include newspapers, radio, television, magazines, social media and numerous websites.
In the following, we will talk about the role and responsibility of media.
We will discuss the importance of media for different age groups, as well as the accessibility of media for different social groups.
Let's start with society's youngest generation. How important is media for children?
A study conducted by the Kaiser Family Foundation found that overall media consumption for children has massively increased in the decade from 1999 to 2009. From a total daily amount of 6 hours and 90 minutes in 1999 to more than 7.5 hours in 2009. Obviously, that study is now very outdated, but with the rise of smartphones, we could only speculate how much higher those numbers will be now. We conducted a survey among students in our school, asking about the accessibility and importance of media, asking what type of media they consume most often. Furthermore, we wanted them to label the importance of media for them on a scale from 1 to 5 to get a better view of how much children really care for news. The results were as follows. None of the 109 fifth graders labeled media to be unimportant in their lives, with most of them getting their information online. The steady decline of print media is also visible among them, with only 8 stating the newspaper to be their primary news source.
Hello, my name is Beth, and I'm 10 years old, and the media I use most often is the TV, the radio, and my phone.
Hi, my name is Julian, and my most information is from my friends or my family.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I get my information from my friends, the TV, and from the radio.
Hello, I'm Aaron. I'm 10 years old, and the media I use most often is the internet.
But however great you think the increasing access to media is for children, as for everything, there's a downside to this too. Too much time online or in front of the TV has led to decreasing attention spans in children. Also, since more time is spent inside consuming media, the younger generation tends to be more likely to become obese later in life. In addition, high social media consumption has led to a distorted body image and mental health problems later in life. Our expert for the second age group will now inform us about how important media is for teenagers.
Media plays a huge role in teenagers' lives, whether it's social media, newspaper articles, which are mostly read online, or the internet itself. Teenagers consume media every day. We conducted a survey in our school, and students from grade 8 to 12 answered multiple questions. What's interesting about the results is that the older the students get, the more important media becomes. For example, in our survey in grade 12, only one person out of 65 students that answered the question deemed media as unimportant, while 56 people deemed media as very or fairly important in their lives. In addition, the most consumed media by teens is social media and the internet in general. This includes online magazines or newspapers, since the consumption of paper newspaper drastically reduced since the internet became accessible for almost everybody. Another important issue with media for teenagers aged 13 to 25 is the overload through the variety of offered media or news. This includes information about several, often emotionalized topics in today's societies, such as immigration, racism, climate change, or now recently, COVID-19.
For our penultimate age group, we interviewed teachers at our school about media. But before that, we will be given some information.
First, the students who get most of their knowledge concerning politics, news and social aspects from institutions like school or university, adults have to rely on media to get their information. The constant process of learning new things and informing oneself has to be an active decision and can mostly be achieved by actively following events through media. It's only reasonable that media gains significant importance in older age groups and with increasing age. Concerning media, the generations previously looked at have one key advantage. They're digital natives. They grew up using the internet, a home to new forms of media, steadily rising in importance and popularity. Adults obviously have to adapt to these innovations, but recent studies show that they're doing quite well. While in 2005, still only less than 10% of adults have been present on social media, that number has already increased by 70% in 2012. In Germany, television and radio are still the predominant form of media. What importance they actually have for adults can be seen by looking at the average time spent watching TV and listening to radio, which is believed to be more than 9 hours per day. As we will see in interviews with consumers between 26 and 60, another important media outlet for adults are newspapers, which still are read by 55% of German citizens. With new media on the rise, the accessibility of news through digital newspapers increases significantly. But let's just ask some adults about their view on media to get a better picture of their outlook on the topic.
I think media is extremely important nowadays. I think reality is conveyed through media. We hardly ever hear anything by or from others, well, we hear something from teachers and at school, but I think most information that people get is given through media. And I think media are important to me too, because I teach subjects where you have to rely on texts and subjects that are based on texts and on information about current events. And that's why I get most material for my lessons through media.
Well, I think they're very important to me because they connect me with my friends, nationally and internationally. And also I watch the news, of course, with media. And I would say it's a very big impact on my daily life because it helps me be connected to friends and to what happens in the world. And it keeps me entertained in the evenings, as with all the other people, I think. So sometimes it can be bad, I believe, the impact that it has, because sometimes I catch myself lying on the sofa and scrolling through my Instagram feed instead of doing something that would actually make me feel happy afterwards. So sometimes I don't actively choose an activity to do in my free time, but sometimes I just lie around and watch, I don't know, cats and dogs and I don't know.
Lastly, our expert will share information about how the importance of media changed over the course of the last century for the elderly in our society. To compare the role that media play today and the role they once did, we have to ask ourselves one central question. What kind of media exist and how do they work? Whilst our parents and grandparents were limited to encyclopedias when it came to researching scientific facts, in our days, there is the internet. The internet gives us the opportunity to do quick and easy research that doesn't require any sort of knowledge apart from basic reading and writing skills. Not only did it get easier to obtain information, the internet made it possible for everyone to post and publish unauthorized news on social networks like Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. As a matter of fact, media didn't just become easier and faster to use, but they've also lost some of their credibility and reliability, since everyone can easily place wrong facts on websites like Wikipedia. Moreover, traditional media such as newspapers, radio and television have lost relatively big amounts of viewer ratings caused by their lack of speed in transmitting information. The clear advantage of the internet shows in the fact that news are accessible at whatever time and place you want them to be. Since we mentioned the relevance of media for different social groups in the general introduction, we will now take a look at some surveys and studies provided by our expert. Tell us about the accessibility of media for different social groups.
With few exceptions, age, education level and income connect closely to online and social media news usage. Online news usage varies considerably by country level wealth. People in advanced economies are much more likely to get news online at least once a day than people in emerging and developing countries. Compared with internet use for news, where the relationship between national economic status and online news usage is evident, social media news use is not strongly related to country-level wealth. People in advanced economies use social media daily for news, at similar rates to those in emerging or developing countries. However, higher income people are more likely than those with lower incomes to use social media daily for news. These surveys clearly show a difference related to wealth. In order to fight this gap, countries have been taking measures to guarantee free access to media and news for everyone. An example for this is the broadcast license fee, which has to be paid in Germany. If people cannot afford this, they have the possibility to be released from it. Another possibility is to improve the access to internet in order to provide even people in rural areas with access to news. However, the risk of fake news and propaganda still exists.
Besides the accessibility of media for different groups, the representation and self-representation of governments also plays an important role in forming the public opinion. Here in Germany, the government has a YouTube channel and the ministries have their own Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook channels. The politicians also have their own channels. Even the Chancellor has a Facebook channel and an Instagram channel. Especially the health ministry is switching advertisements to care about the corona rules. So the government and the opposition is well represented on social media with their own channels. In Germany there is a Bundespressekonferenz, which would be translated as Federal Press Conference, where journalists can ask the government questions which has to be answered. So the government and the ministries are well and objectively represented in the media. But in Germany it's forbidden for the state institutions to support parties in regard of elections in their function as a state institute, especially SS.
Censorship in the People's Republic of China is implemented or mandated by China's ruling party, the Chinese Communist Party. The government censors content for mainly political reasons. Finally, censorship is important for the state leadership to maintain control over the population. This enables the government to shape the public opinion with the help of politically controlled media and mass propaganda, namely party-controlled selective information sharing. Communist Party politicians are also positively represented in the media because of state control over them. For these reasons, the US have recently classified various media as official Chinese state representations. So the self-representation of the Chinese government in the media is very important for them. Because there are no independent media, the state does not have to become active in social media itself, since it can spread every information they want to the people through the media.
The US government's response to the coronavirus has met a lot of criticism. Multiple times the government and especially President Donald Trump have been accused of having reacted too late. Trump could have seen it coming, and MSNBC even accuses Trump's government of a lack of presence as the pandemic worsened. The Guardian also designates the president unable to grasp the severity of the problem. But while the media mostly describes the government's reaction to the virus in negative ways, the president himself claims to have everything under control. The government even has the resources to help other countries like Angola to combat the virus. After having downplayed the severity of the coronavirus, Donald Trump claims to always have treated the virus very seriously. The government of the United States also published an article about all the measures they have taken against the spreading of the virus. The government displays a positive attitude towards defeating the virus, and it encourages their citizens to not only stay calm because it will go away, but also to come back stronger than before. While every government has handled the crisis differently, one thing they all have in common: they try to present themselves as well as possible, but in different ways.
It is clear that we all use media as a means of communication and information. But how important are they in forming public opinion? And do we actually realize the influence media have on us? Take a brief second to think about the impact media have on you and your perception of certain topics. To give you a quick look into the perception of these questions by students 10 to 18 years of age, we organized a quick survey within our school community. Would you say that media in general influence your opinion? Surprisingly, with 115 votes for no, quite a lot of students said that media do not at all influence their opinion in any way, although there still were more votes saying the opposite, with 128 votes for yes. This might have to do with the age of many of the students. Some might not be using any kind of media, like social media, in their daily life, or simply do not have much trust in media. How would you rate the influence of media on your opinion-forming process on a scale from 0 to 10, if 0 equals not existent and 10 equals very big? As you can see in the chart, most votes concentrate around the mean value of the scale, which is 5. The more extreme and less average the number, and therefore the assessment is, the less votes there are. The arithmetic mean of all votes is 4.26, so that is what the average voter would estimate the influence of media on their opinion. In what subject area do media influence you or your opinion the most? Apparently, for the 243 students taking part in this survey, the most popular subjects in media are politics and sports, with around 70 votes each. Regarding the current political situation with COVID and the US elections going on, and again their age, this seems logical. Subjects like economy aren't as popular, while cultural and local news or media find more attention by teenagers. What did you feel being confronted by the ongoing and changing information supply on COVID during the lockdown? These are the feelings that were evoked in some of the students by the COVID coverage. It is striking that so many, about 41%, were overwhelmed by the ongoing information supply. Nevertheless, many of the students felt enlightened despite or even because of all the information. But that this did not automatically lead to a feeling of safety is shown by the small number of people who voted for it. How would you rate the press or media coverage during the pandemic so far, in particular during the lockdown, on a scale from 0 to 10, if 0 equals very bad and 10 equals excellent? Looking at the chart, it is significant that a high percentage of people voted for the most average figure, which is 5. The other values gained rather little votes. Another thing that strikes the eye is that 0 was chosen a stunning 17 times, while 10 wasn't even picked once. Therefore, there definitely is more of a negative tendency in terms of the perception of media coverage during the pandemic.
Especially in times of a global pandemic, in times of COVID-19, fake news are an extremely prominent topic in every country of our world. People are scared of the dangers of the virus and by that, more easily influenced and manipulated. Fake news are making people question the things that are being reported on the state news channels, and therefore, people will possibly lose trust in these channels that are being supported by the state. This is a huge threat to the perception of the state media's reliability and its reputation amongst critical society. From a reduced global point of view, stated by the Renches Institute Digital News Report, the trust in state media sources has fallen by 2% across all markets from 2018 to 2019. Brazil and the UK citizens are most worried about fake news, with 85% and 70% of its citizens, followed by Spain with 68% and the US and France with 67%. Now, why do people even believe fake news in the first place? Our psychology and English teacher Mr. Bauer will explain it to you.
We tend to think that news are kind of neutral. I mean, if we watch normal news, from state television or well-known newspapers, but definitely those news are in a way also biased or influenced by opinion. You can see that you have a variety of different newspapers in Germany, the Taz, which is leaning towards the left. You have Frankfurter Allgemeine, which is rather conservative. So you see the news are not really neutral, so there is always some kind of political message involved here.
So what's the definition of fake news?
Well, I would not really call it fake news. I would differentiate it into two different terms. The first one is misinformation and the second one is disinformation. And misinformation is, just acquiring the wrong facts without any intention. Yeah, so you just read the wrong message, the wrong news, but nobody intended to misinform you. With disinformation, it's different because this is intended. And who intends that? As we look at fake news around the world, it seems as if, most fake news are spread by conservative worldviews or conservative broadcasters, and within populist governments, they seem to be more and more important.
Many of you might think, how do I even recognize fake news? We of course do not only want to provide you with pure information on fake news, but also give you some useful tips for dealing with them. Therefore, we have created an instruction on how to deal with fake news in a proper way. One characteristic which often reveals fake news as fake news is the way they are constructed. Fake news often combine an extensive amount of exclamation marks with question marks and eye-catching pictures to move the actual message into the background and reach the spectator on an emotional level and prevent them from questioning the concrete message. Another hint by which you can more easily determine whether you are confronted with fake news is checking the author or the source's imprint. In Germany, for example, websites are obliged to have an imprint to prevent fake news or fake sites on the internet in general. One thing which often helps to find out whether the message is true or false is comparing the message with other sources. You can, for example, look up that specific message in your preferred search engine and check whether the message has also been published to other trustable sources from your country. You can also recognize fake news by checking the statistics for authenticity and checking pictures and videos of the date of the publications. You can do this by taking a screenshot of the picture and inserting it in the Google image function, respectively for videos by using platforms such as YouTube Data Viewer, for example. The use of fact checkers on the internet can also be helpful. When you have noticed that the fake news are fake news, it is extremely important that you inform the person who has sent or shared the message so they can inform others who may have seen the message as well about it being not true. In addition to that, you should always report it as fake news. Furthermore, we want you to remember to always question the message's purpose. Which advantage could the author have by spreading this information? If you find out the purpose, you can often recognize whether the information is true or false.
To ensure a more global understanding of the responsibility of media in different countries, we have asked some of our friends from foreign countries to answer a few questions. Were fake news an issue in your country during the COVID-19 pandemic? If yes, how did they influence citizens' thinking, eventually even causing societal tensions?
Personally, I think that fake news is a global problem now, and it affects every country in the world. So I think that in Russia, the fake news weren't such a big problem as they could be in, for example, the USA or Germany, I don't know. But there were some fake news, especially in the start of the pandemic, for example, in March or April. And it caused some panic among citizens of Russia.
So during the pandemic, one situation that comes to mind is when there were the Black Lives Matter protests, and then we saw some news reports coming forward saying that, as an example, at this specific rally, like 20 people were confirmed with COVID cases, which a lot of people said was not true, but it's kind of an example of creating polarization in a community that's already quite divided on the subject of Black Lives Matter, not necessarily in Canada, but being in Canada and also being close to the US, you also get a lot of the commotion from down there up here, it feels like.
At the beginning of the pandemic, fake news in Ukraine spread at such a speed that experts did not have time to refute them of a lack of property information doubt their veracity. In my opinion, it was the misunderstanding and disorientation in the information space that ultimately caused tension in society.
What do you think? How important are media in forming public opinion?
So this is a question that is constantly being asked nowadays, and I personally believe that media are a big driving factor when it comes to forming public opinion. Now there's also another thing that I would like to add, and it's that social media has become more influential than print media, and you can kind of understand why when you look at how much time we spend on our phones every day.
I think they're very important because nowadays most people gather news from social media, especially young people who are whose almost one source of news is social media, as I think.
Of course, the pandemic are important in shaping public opinion, especially around such agiotaged ones, which includes the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is not only because most of the information we get from there, but also because we trust this information to a greater extent. As an example, you can look at the beginning of summer in Ukraine after the release of a news feed about the dangers of shaking hands. When the majority of citizens abruptly stopped shaking hands with each other and got along with only verbal greetings and greeted with their elbows. I believe that this example sufficiently illustrates the importance of the media in shaping public opinion around the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic.
The importance of the media forming public opinions, I think that it's not always a given that people believe what they hear, especially some certain news sources kind of already have a rep for being unreliable. But I think that in having news sources that are just completely unreliable, you make it more of a subject where more people are inclined to think that the news is fake. And so there's this idea that you can't hear anything, that you can't believe anything you hear, which isn't a good idea, but I think that it's just important that people are critical of what news sources they divulge in. So